I'm going to preface this episode by saying I do appreciate P basses. They're classic, they're iconic, and they extrude mojo, whatever that is. And let's face it, they are visually perfect in the hands of certain players, where other basses just wouldn't look right. And for certain styles of music like 60s R&B and Motown, the P-tone is just right for. Even though it isn't the first electric bass, it is probably the first commercially produced bass guitar. Invented in 1951 by Leo Fender, the first P-bass design has a slab body and a single coil pickup, and this lasted for 6 years until 1957, when the design changed to the split humbucking pickup and contoured body. Like the B-52 Bomber, this overall cosmetic design has pretty much remained unchanged for over half a century. So it should be no surprise that an instrument with such a long history and a major impactor on the music industry is going to have many loyal followers and fans. Unfortunately, with icons also comes a lot of hubris and hyperbole, to the point where it's told over and over for generations that it becomes part of folklore. So let's put on our tinfoil thinking caps and address some of these P-bass conspiracy theories. And let's try to separate fact from fiction. Now, if you agree or disagree with my assessments, feel free to make a comment below. Claim: a P-bass is all you need. Actually, a well-maintained, well-set-up instrument that feels comfortable in your hands and delivers the tone qualities that you seek is all you need. That doesn't necessarily have to be a P-bass. My personal bass criteria is having 2 pickups. Even my Precision has 2 pickups, because I prefer the tone shaping flexibility as well as the extra articulation that a bridge pickup provides. I also usually prefer active basses over passive ones, so if I have a choice between these 2 basses for a typical variety band gig, this bass will give me more of what I prefer, not this one. The individual player needs to determine what they need out of a bass guitar. The bass guitar shouldn't determine that for you. The only thing that any bass needs to do is to inspire you to pick it up and play it as many times as possible. Claim: a PJ bass with a soloed P pickup is not the same as a regular P bass. Proponents for this argument state that the extra wiring of the pickups, plus the pull of the extra magnets on the string, will drastically affect the tone of the P pickup on a PJ. I personally can't hear that level of detail. What makes a bigger difference to me is the manufacturer of the pickup and the model. For example, my American Performer has Yosemite pickups. These pickups tend to be bright and modern sounding. They don't really have a lot of those vintagey qualities. So when I solo this pickup on this bass, it sounds like a modern P bass. It may not sound like your P bass, especially if you own a vintage one, but it sounds like a P bass nonetheless. Your mileage may vary. More on this later. Claim: a P bass always fits perfectly in a mix. First of all, what constitutes perfectly in a mix is going to vary from person to person, and it will be totally subjective based on individual taste and experience. The genre of music will also factor, as some genres favor bass more forward in the mix and some more in the back. The other players in the band will also factor in. Is the drummer consistent with tight hi-hats and groove? Or is the drummer more open with a lot of washy cymbals? How about the guitarist? Does he play as part of the ensemble? Or does the guitarist want to be the loudest thing in the universe? Do you have keyboards? Do you have horns? Once you consider many of these factors, the biggest difference is you, the bass player. What kind of strings do you use? And how new or old are they? What kind of amp do you use? And is it compatible with the rest of the equipment in the band? Do you finger a bass with soft finesse, with an even attack of each string and note? Or do you hit the strings harder with inconsistency? Because a ham-fisted bass player playing a P bass with inconsistent groove is not going to sit in a mix better than a well-seasoned player playing another bass type with other well-seasoned team players. What sits perfectly in the mix every time for one player may not work for another player, because there's just way too many variables. Claim: Leo got it right the first time. Well, yes he did. But he also got it right this time, and this time. There's other times he got it right too. So unless the purpose is rhetoric, I don't really get the point of this statement. Claim: The P bass is the most recorded bass in history. Is this possible? Maybe. Carol Kaye alone is on over 10,000 recordings. Still, there's no way to really quantify or qualify the statement that the P bass is the most recorded bass in history. The P bass definitely has a time advantage over other iconic basses. So up until about the 1980s, it may have been true. But in the 1980s, bass synthesizer began to appear on more and more hit records. This is important because it allowed composers to utilize notes below the range of a bass guitar. This necessitated a change in the bass guitar industry, hence commercially produced 5-string basses. The P bass may be one of the first commercially produced bass guitars, but standard single pickup P basses were one of the last models to get a 5-string variant. Now, I'm not saying the P bass went away. It was still widely used just as it is today. But by the mid-80s, it was just another color on the tone palette. It dominated in some genres, but in others it was practically non-existent. Home multi-track units appeared in the 1980s as well. This allowed artists to record and release music independently, and they were just using whatever bass that could fit in their budget. Then, in the coming decades, digital technology and the internet changed everything. Digital technology allowed anybody with a computer to record music, and the internet allowed anybody with that same computer to distribute their music to the world. So while it's possible that the P bass is the most recorded bass in history, unless you itemize and vet every single recording that's ever been made, there's no way you could say that with any amount of certainty. And considering the extreme volume of music that is available to us today, it's kind of a moot point. Claim: nothing can sound like a P bass. A P bass isn't rocket science. Part of the beauty and magic of a P bass is in its simplicity. It's a pickup here in this spot. It's a volume. It's a tone. That's it. No bells, no whistles. A pickup in this position on any bass is going to be in the ballpark with different degrees of accuracy because it would depend on which P bass you're comparing it to. Even comparing P basses to themselves can all sound different. To illustrate this, I'm going to demo 5 basses. At least one, it could be more, is going to be an actual single pickup P bass. The rest are all basses with pickups in that position. Listen and try to identify the single pickup P bass or P basses used in the demonstration. Now, do all these sound different? Absolutely. It's 5 unique basses with 5 different pickups. But the purpose of this demonstration wasn't to find identical bass tones. The purpose was to ascertain what constitutes P bass tone. And if I was in a situation where a project leader said, I need a P bass tone here, any one of these would have worked. When this channel gets 500 subscribers, I'll post the answers. So please, share this video with your bass player friends. So if I admire P basses, why did I make this video? Because a lot of that propaganda follows an underlying philosophy that the player is interchangeable but the bass isn't. And every time I see these reasons on social media, I do this. But I could think of 2 really good reasons why a bass player should look into a P bass. The first is inspiration. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the classic design or the simplicity of the bass itself. But there's something about picking up a standard B bass that just makes me want to play a certain way. Usually a more classic way. And I've heard other bass players say this, so I know it's not just me. But the second reason is even more important, and that's manual bass mastery. The analogy I like to use is like the manual transmission of an automobile. It's a more primitive system. Therefore, the driver has to acquire certain skills in order to operate the vehicle. Well, a standard P bass is very similar. You're not given much here.
So, over time, many P bass players develop skills to maximize the utility of the bass. It's not uncommon to see a seasoned P bass player utilize the string length to pluck different tone colors. And there's pick players that do this too. Lifetime P bass players also seem to have better finger control, knowing precisely where to attack harder or lay off for finesse. Now, a lot of bass players do this playing other types of basses, but it seems to me that lifetime P bass players have a mastery of this, because they had to learn it by necessity. And these are great skills to have in the tool bag. I'm Rib13. Thanks for watching. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next time.